Hello, I am Toasty. Welcome to my first video where I'm going to be showing off my Mayael the Anima commander deck. This is going to be the shorter, simplified version of the video, where I'm just going to kind of give a brief overview of the deck. If you're newer to the game and don't understand necessarily what a lot of these like staple cards do, or some of these just more well-known cards do, I will have a second video going much more in-depth and really explaining what the cards do. So anyway, to start things off, this is my commander, Mayael the Anima. This is a nice altar I got to have like flowers around the border. If you know what the actual card looks like, you know what's different. If you don't, well, it just looks really good. Anyway, she only costs 3 mana, which is a 2/3, and you can pay 6 mana, 3 in Naya, to look at the top 5 cards, put a creature card, power 5 or greater from among them into play, and the rest on the bottom in any order. So this deck revolves around that kind of ability. It's got a lot of big creatures that you can cheat into play with Mayael the Anima. Once you've used her like 2 or 3 times, the game's probably already over. She's kind of a must-kill. She doesn't stay on the board for long, because reaching 6 mana with her is very dangerous. Alright, I'm going to start off with the lands in order of colors. So this is Reliquary Tower. It's just simple. It's a good commander card. This probably doesn't really belong in this deck because your hand isn't full very often, but it's still good. Reliquary Tower. This is Kessig Wolfrun. This is a great card, a good finisher if you really need it. Have a lot of mana, don't have anything with trample, it gets that last bit of damage through very nicely. Nykthos, this makes the mana for Kessig Wolfrun. This thing makes an absurd amount of mana most of the time. There's a lot of green devotion in this deck, and you can make, just absurd amounts of mana with this thing. And this combos with a card in the deck, Nyx Bloom Ancient. It does a nice little combo with that. I'll kind of go over later with some of the other cards. Temple of the False God. Typical, pretty common commander card. Makes 2 mana if you have 5 or more lands. Here are the basic mountains. There are 3 basic mountains. 3 basic plains. And 1 basic forest. And the other 2 green producing lands the other 3 are Yavimaya, which fixes my lands and forests. Very nice, great card. Boseiju, who endures. Channel, destroys artifact, enchantment, non-basic land. Very good. It's pretty much the only instant-like card in this deck. One of this deck's gimmicks is that it runs only 3 sorceries currently. Normally only runs 2. So, yeah, this is a good, removal spell, because there's not much of it in here. Mosswort Bridge, great card, cheats in creatures, that's kind of what this deck does, so it does it more. Arid Mesa, crack it, get mountain or plains, other fetch, we got 3 fetches. Of its 3 colors, I don't have any off-color fetches in here just because, well, 1, they're expensive, and 2, just don't feel like I need it for this deck. This deck's very consistent as it is. Jetmir's Garden, just recently got this new Triome. It's great. Fixes for all 3 colors. Savannah, it's plains forest, literally nothing else. That's all it is. It's great. It's the only actual dual I have in here. Here are my 3 shocks. And then here are my 2 battle lands, or tango lands, whatever you want to call them. I love these lands. I just really like that cycle of lands from Battle for Zendikar. They're not particularly good, but I just like that they're fetchable. It's kind of nice. Yeah, 2 temples. These probably shouldn't be in here. There are better lands for these slots, but it's okay. 3 pathways. All 3 in my colors. Pathways are very nice. I love them. They're good. These 2 lands I have 2 filter lands in here. I have the green-red one and the red-white one. These I'll go over later. These are here to combo with some cards, certain card in the deck. So I'll set those to the side to talk about later. I only have one of these battle lands, or whatever they're called, bond lands or something, whatever. The ones that make you have 2 or more opponents. It's good. Sunpetal Grove, Rootbound Crag. They're nice. They're good. Check lands. I have 1 Grove of the Burn Willows. Mostly just because I like the From the Vault foiling. But it's also just kind of a cool little land. Rith's Grove. This land is way better than I initially thought. It's kind of like the Ravnica double lands, well, like bounce lands, where they bounce something back when they enter. But those enter tapped. This doesn't enter tapped. So when you play it, you can play it, and if you do want to keep it, you can bounce a land back to your hand. Otherwise, you can have it enter, make a mana, and then sacrifice it, because you sacrifice it unless you return something. So you can use this as like a just a way to make like 1 temporary mana if you don't feel like bouncing something back. Command Tower, typical Reflecting Pool, Mana Confluence. Forbidden Orchard, this card is also in here for another card in the deck, and also I like the From the Vault foiling. This card is really good. It makes 1 mana of any color, but it gives other people creatures. That is not a problem in this deck. In fact, it works toward its benefits. It's kind of like Oath of Druids. There's a card in here that combos with it. You'll see. Leave that there. Now we're on to 1-drops. Birds of Paradise. Yep. Everybody knows Birds of Paradise. Soul Ring. Miri's Guile. This card is great. Upkeep, look at the top 3, put them back in any order. This helps rearrange the top of the deck for Mayael. It's also in here, one of the key cards of this deck, and the original build around is Time Sifter. This helps set up Time Sifter, kind of. Most of the time when I play Time Sifter, I lose to it. So, it works, kind of. You'll see. Sensei's Divining Top. This copy is in Italian, just because it was cheaper. I got it. It was gotten in a trade, so yeah. I don't know how to read Italian, but I know what this card does. As an artifact for 1 mana, you can pay 1 mana to rearrange the top 3 cards of your library. You can do this at any time, and you can tap it draw a card, and put this back on top of your library. This has a couple of combos in the deck. One of them is the same as Miri's Guile. The other one I'll show off later. Burning Tree Emissary. I pulled this in a Double Masters pack. I just really like this card. The foil is so nice. Not particularly good in the deck. Just kind of here because it's a pet card of mine. Sky Shroud Elf. This mana dork is way better than I think most people would think. It taps to add a green, which is nice, whatever. Like 2 mana, 1/1 to make a green. Not particularly good, but its filter ability is really good. This deck can make a lot of green, but not as much with red and white. This can filter any of the green you make into red and white, which is really good. For example, tapping Nykthos for Green Devotion. Let's say you make 15 green with that, and have like white cards in your hand. You can't play any of those with that, but this allows that to happen. You can turn all of that all that green into white or red or whatever you want. So that's good. Arcane Signet, typical commander card, good mana ramp. Sterling Grove. This card originally I bought for a different deck and then realized it makes a lot of sense in this deck. The enchantments in this deck are extremely important to keeping this deck functioning. So giving them Shroud is really valuable, as well as this is probably one of the very few tutors in the deck. I think there's maybe 1 other card in the deck that can tutor at all. Yeah, and this, just pay 1, sack it, go get any enchantment. This is really good, really efficient, kind of a must-have in the deck now that I've actually started using it. Swiftfoot Boots, Lightning Greaves, they fill the same role. They give Mayael haste. They also give my other big beaters haste and hexproof and all that. Nice stuff. They're good. Cream of the Crop. This is another library, like a top of the library setter. Whenever a creature comes into play under your control, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is that creature's power. If you do, put one of those cards on top of your library and the rest on the bottom in any order. This is busted, because the deck's full of high power creatures. You drop a 9/9 on the board, and it just goes and looks at the top 9 cards and puts one of them on top and the rest on the bottom. So you get to really pick what you want next. It's a great card. Scroll Rack, kind of similar top of the deck setting stuff. Pay 1, tap it, put any number of cards from your hand on top of your library and draw. Well, pay 1, tap it, put some cards from your hand aside, draw that many cards, and then put those cards on top that you set aside. Basically, you exchange some cards in your hand with cards on top of your deck. It's a great way to set the top of your deck very specifically. Sylvan Library, same idea. Draw 3 cards on your draw step. Put 2 back or pay 4 life to keep them. Very common commander card, very good card. Not Vine Mystic. This is in here for a similar reason to the Filter Lands. And pay 1, tap it, add Naya. This mana dork is absurd. When it stays on the board, it gets killed very often. It is a very powerful mana dork. So that will be set aside for the same reason as the Filter Lands. Fires of Yavimaya. This is one of my haste enablers. I personally like this one a lot more than Rhythm of the Wild for a couple of reasons. One, this one flies under the radar compared to Rhythm of the Wild. It's less important to kill because it doesn't do anything else really, but it also, I like that it doubles as a combat trick, so sometimes it actually comes in handy. I have won fights in combat with that +2/+2 ability. It's really nice. I've also saved creatures from spot removal with it, like lightning bolts and such. It's a great card. I like that. On the other hand, Rhythm of the Wild, my other haste enabler, 3 mana enchantment. Not creature spells you control can't be countered. And when they enter the battlefield, they can either have haste or a 1/1 counter. This card is much more commonly killed than Fires of Yavimaya. If you're going to use a spot removal card on an enchantment, it's going to be Rhythm of the Wild, not Fires of Yavimaya. This card is busted. It's really, really good. Yeah, enough said. Lifecrafter's Bestiary, another top of the library setter, and also card advantage. It's great. It's nice. Yeah. This is Vivian something or another. I have the English copy behind it. Vivian Champion of the Wilds. I have the fancy Japanese alternate art copy here, but again, don't know how to read it. So this is what the card does. 3 mana, 4 loyalty, gives your creature spells flash, which is, again, really important since this deck doesn't really have much instant speed interaction. You can +1 to give something vigilance and reach, but that doesn't matter because it's our -2 that matters. Look at the top 3 cards, exile 1 face down, and put the rest on the bottom in any order. For as long as that card remains exiled, you can cast it if it's a creature. So, since this deck has mostly creatures in it, it's really easy to -2 her, put a creature under, and then it's just an extra creature you can cast for the rest of the game. Selvala, Explorer Returned. This card was originally in here for a really stupid little combo with Panglacial Worm. I took Panglacial Worm out and kept her because she's just good. She had 2/4 for 3. You can tap. Each player reveals the top card. For each non-land card revealed, add a green, gain a life, and then everybody draws that card. It's a great card. It's just a really good mana ramp card. Makes a lot of green. At most 4. Rings of Bright Earth. This is the first little combo reference card. So Rings of Bright Earth, where you activate an ability, if it isn't a mana ability, you can pay 2 and copy that ability. This works with Mayael's ability and several other cards' abilities in the deck. So you can pay 6, tap her, pay another 2, so you pay 8 to get 2 uses of her ability. Another thing this works with, if you have extra mana and haven't done anything else for your turn, let's say on the last person's end step, you can tap top and pay, let's say, 4 to copy the ability twice. So you tap, draw a card, put top back on top, and then the second ability resolves, you draw a card, which will be top. And then, let's say you copied it again, so you'll just draw another card, because you can't put top back on top once it's in a hidden zone. So it just draws you free cards. Kind of a cool little combo. I like this. Very useful. Yeah. So, that. On to the 3-drops. Oh, wait. That was already the 3-drops. Never mind. Still on the 3-drops. Bear Cub. This very recent addition to the deck, just recently pulled this from a pack. It's very good. 3/3 for 3. Attacks a player with 8 or more lands, which will happen very frequently in Commander. You can look at the top 8 cards, put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking that player, and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Great filtering. It just finds a creature. 100% of the time you will be finding a creature with this ability. There's no way you don't. It is very good. Maybe it's not something so great. Maybe you hit like a Vizier in the Menagerie, but sometimes you hit like a, I don't know, a Ilharg or a Dragonlord Dramoka. So, a great card. Vizier the Menagerie. This is kind of a pet card of mine, but it's just really good. 4 mana, 3/4. Look at the top card at any time. Cast it if it's a creature. You can spend mana as though it were any color. Yep. Samit, another haste enabler. Gets you scries. Gets buffs creatures. 5 loyalty. Yeah, she's good. Shalai. And this is another important piece of the deck. Gives your things hexproof. The deck is very weak to spot removal. People will kill your creatures. Always. Every time they get a chance. So it's a 3/4 with flying. Gives your other stuff hexproof, which is very nice. Thran, Temporal Gateway. This is in here to cheat things into play. Specifically, it cheats historic permanents, which is artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. So it cheats in legendary permanents from my hand at instant speed, and it cheats artifacts in. The reason this is in is to put Time Sifter onto the battlefield at the end of the opponent's last turn, so that you get the first use of it. Otherwise, it's just good. And it cheats in some really good creatures in this deck. Elvish Viper, same deal. 4 mana, 1/1. You pay a green and tap to put any creature from your hand onto the battlefield. Really good. Defense of the Heart. This is the combo piece for Forbidden Orchard. This card says, at the beginning of your upkeep, if one of your opponents controls 3 or more creatures, sacrifice this and search your library for any 2 creatures and put them onto the battlefield. So Forbidden Orchard gives opponents creatures. So let's say you untap, upkeep, this trigger goes onto the stack. You tap to make 1 mana of any color and give someone their 3rd creature. And this goes out, says, oh hey, they have 3 creatures, you sacrifice it, go fetch anything. It's really good. This is the other tutor in the deck that I can remember. Urbrask, another haste enabler, shuts down your opponent's creatures. This one's kind of annoying because it's only 4 power, so it just barely flies under the radar for Mayael's ability. And it's just good. It's great. Yeah. Time Sifter. Here it is. The infamous Time Sifter. Beginning of each player's upkeep, they exile the top card of their library. Well, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, everybody exiles the top card of their library. Whoever's revealed the highest CMC card takes an extra turn after this one. If people tie, you do it again. So basically, this thing, since this deck runs a lot of really big creatures with high mana costs, you have a pretty good chance of winning Time Sifter fights. That's kind of why it's in here. You use top, Miri's Guile, Sylvan Library, etc., to specifically set the top of your library. It's great. Yeah. Perfros. Other creatures you control have haste. Cheats creatures into play. It's a 7/6, so Mayael can see it. It's great. Garrick. This kind of probably shouldn't be in here. There's probably should be Greater Good instead, but basically 5 mana, enters, and then you're almost always just -3 to just draw a bunch of cards. Sometimes I +1, but very rarely. Only if I don't have anything else going on. Sigarda, flying hexproof, keeps your opponents from making you sacrifice creatures. She's good. She's a solid creature. Karametra, another god, 6/7. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you can search for any forest or plains card, which includes duels, as long as it has the land types. Put it on the battlefield tapped, shuffle. It's great. Mana ramp. Ilharg. This is a good card. It's pretty hard to kill. It 6/6, whenever it attacks, puts another creature out, tapped and attacking, and then returns it to your hand. So it's like a good way to cheat in creatures, and it also, if it dies or is put into exile from the battlefield, you put it on your library third from the top, so Mayael can see it when she uses her ability, and also it's just, it's just hard to kill. It's good. So it's 6/6 with trample, yeah, for 5. Alright, Dragonlord Dramoka, a 5/7, can't be countered, flying lifelink. Opponents can't cast spells during your turn. This keeps you from getting countered. It keeps your creatures from getting killed during combat. It's like basically keeps you interaction proof for your turns. Really good. She's just a big body too. It's one of the very few instances of lifelink in the deck. It's pretty hard to get your life back. So yeah, she's good. Rith the Awakener. This deck is in here for flavor and nothing else. This was the original commander. When I first started working with this color set, Naya, it was a Rith the Awakener was the original commander. It was like a tokens-based deck, and yeah. So this card is just in here to keep that theme going. It's a pet card of mine. I love Rith. She's really awesome. It's a 6/6. Deals damage to a player. You can pay 3 and make a bunch of sapperlings for each permanent. You choose a color. Put a sapperling into play for each permanent of that color. Usually going to be picking green, but depending on the play group, you might pick something else. It's good. Yeah. It's not good enough for this deck. It should be something else, but it's just in here for flavor for now. Atali Primal Storm. This card is really good. This card is nuts. It's a 6/6. When you give it haste, it's even worse. 6/6 for 6, and whenever it attacks, exiles the top card of each player's library, and you can cast any number of spells from among them without paying their mana costs. It usually swings for 6, and you get to cast 4 spells for free. With your own deck, you're casting nutty spells like Gisela. With opponents' decks, you're casting, I don't know, maybe they're win cons, or maybe you're getting a little bit less lucky, you're getting like a Ponder or something, but even then, no matter what, it's good. You're just getting 4 free spells. Sometimes you'll hit lands. That's what sucks, but, you know, it's a really, really powerful card. Woodland Bellower. This is another tutor. This is the third one that I forgot about, but it's a very specific tutor. It's a 6/5 for 6. Enters battlefield, you search for any creature card CMC 3 or less. Non-legendary creature CMC 3 or less. And put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. This can get Bear Cub. It can get Mana Dorks. That's about all you'll ever fetch with it. Archon of Valor's Reach, 5/6 flying vigilance trample. Enters battlefield, choose artifact, enchantment, instant, sorcery, or planeswalker. Players can't cast spells of the chosen type. This deck has several lock pieces in it. A lot of these creatures lock down your opponent's actions to keep your plan safe, and this is one of them. You can just disable a certain card type of your choice. Typically it will be instant, because that's the only thing that there aren't any of in this deck. There are no instants in this deck. So if you pick instant, cannot do anything to you, and will only harm your opponents. Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight. It's a 5/5 flying first strike. This card, essentially, double damage to your opponents, and half damage to you. So it says if a source would deal damage to an opponent, or a permanent opponent controls, deals double that damage, and if a source would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, half that damage, rounded up. It's very good. Drakuseth, 7/7. This kind of is the board wipe of the deck. This is about as close as it gets. Enters battlefield, deals 4 damage to any target and 3 damage to 2 other targets. So or not enter the battlefield, attacks. Flying 7/7. So it's just good. So flying 7/7, and it also blows up 3 things when it attacks, which is nice. Or just deals extra damage to your opponents, whichever you choose. Sarah's Emissary, the next lock piece in the deck. Enters the battlefield, flying 7/7 for 7. Enters the battlefield, choose a card type. You and creatures you control have protection from the chosen card type. So you choose creatures, or you can choose enchantments, artifacts, whatever you're most scared of. And it just protects you from those, like, until she dies. And she protects herself, too. So, very, very powerful. Deceiver Reform. This is a new addition to the deck. I put this in, actually, today. I've had it on my list for the deck for a while, though. It's a 7 mana, 8/8. It does require colorless mana, which this deck is very capable of producing. 7 mana, 8/8. At the beginning of combat on your turn, reveal the top card of your library. If a creature card is revealed this way, you may have creatures you control other than Deceiver Reform become copies of that card until end of turn. You may put that card on the bottom of your library. There are some right ways to use this card and some wrong ways to use this card. Most of the creatures in this deck are already big enough and unique enough on their own that you don't want them to become what's on top. Sometimes there are some cards in this deck that you do want. The one thing you definitely don't want, though, is to flip something that's legendary. It's great if they become all copies of Dragonlord and Tarka, except that will kill all your creatures, because legend rule does still apply. So you do have to be careful with what you flip. Make sure you don't accidentally copy something that's legendary. For example, something that's very good, you can pick Nyxbloom Ancient. You can pick It That Betrays. You can pick, let's just say, Void Winnower, Apex Devastator. There are some really good options, just as long as you're not flipping something legendary. And again, this deck rearranges the top of the library a lot, so it's pretty easy to make sure you hit something good. Chip. Speaking of Dragonlord Atarka, here she is. Flying 8/8 Trample, enters battlefield, deals 5 damage to anything except for players. Divided as you choose. Very good. This card enables some really nutty turns. It is very good to flash in during combat after blocks have been declared. There are a few ways to do this, whether it be with Elvish Viper to cheat it out of your hand, or you know what's on top of your deck with Mayael and you use her ability during combat. It's very good to cheat in after people say, no, I'm not going to block. I'll take the 10 from your other creatures, and then you flash this in and say, okay, well, I'll make 10 treasures then. This is busted. Angel of Serenity, one of the few removal spells in this deck, and it's also a protection spell. It's a 5/6 flying, enters battlefield, exile 3 target creatures for up to 3 other target creatures from the battlefield and or creature cards from graveyards. And when she leaves the battlefield, you return those cards to their owner's hands. So she can remove other people's things temporarily and put them into their hand, or can get your own creatures back from your graveyard, or hide creatures you have on the battlefield. She's good because, one, this deck has no graveyard recursion. One thing that will later be in the deck, and I haven't gotten around to yet, Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, will eventually be in the deck. That can recur my graveyard to my library, which is good. Otherwise, this deck can't really get anything back from the graveyard. So this is one way to do it. It's also just great removal. Nyxbloom Ancient. This is the infamous combo card for these 3 cards. And some other cards, but these are the 3 that matter most. When you tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. So, you tap a forest for 3 green. Pay one of those 3 green and tap this guy for Naya. Now, instead of having 3 green for your forest, you have 2 green, and then you have, let's say, 3, 3, 3. So you have 5 green, 3 red, and 3 white. That is an absurd amount of mana to be making for 2 cards. It's a grand total of 11 mana. As well as these filter lands do the same kind of thing. Tap a forest for mana, and then tap this, so you have 3 green. Now you have 2 green. 2 green, you add either 6 red, 6 green, or 3 red and 3 green. This is just nasty. This card is really good with these kinds of lands. It also works with Nykthos. Nykthos, you tap a forest for 3 green, and then pay 2 of that green to tap Nykthos for, let's say your devotion to green is 6. 6 green times 3, you would get, bad math, 18 green, which is absurd. Yeah, I think you get the idea. Oogan the Spirit Dragon. This is one of the very few board wipes in the deck. You really good against tokens. Some spot removal, kind of. And if you ult it, you've won the game already. Terastodon, again, removal. Enters the battlefield, destroys 3 target non-creature permanents for each permanent, and put it into a graveyard. This way its controller gets a 3/3 green elephant. This one is good removal, kills lands, and other just good things. And the other thing it does is it turns on your, oh shoot, I can't remember the name of the card. The card that cares about opponents having 3 creatures. It gives them that 3rd creature. Alright, Archetype of Endurance, 6/5 boar. Creatures you control have hexproof. Creatures opponents control can't have hexproof. Busted. This just protects all of your shit. It's really good. Another lock piece, keeps your opponents from interacting with your board. Vorinclex. Trample. Whenever you tap a land for mana, you get 1 extra mana, so kind of doubles your mana. And whenever an opponent taps a land for mana, that land doesn't untap during the next untap step, so kind of halves your opponent's mana. This is... People hate playing against this card. This card is really mean to play against. This deck is just really mean, so it's okay. Archon, Blazing Archon, again, another lock piece. This is a very nice foily card. I like the way this looks. That's 9 mana for a 5/6. Flying, creatures can't attack you. It sucks to sit across the table from this card. This card is... just people can't attack me, just period. It's really, I'm going to sit over here and do my own thing while you guys play the game kind of card. It's mean, but this deck's mean again. Zakama Primal Calamity. This is very commonly the game ender in this deck. 9/9 for 9. Vigilance, Reach, Trample, and enters the battlefield, untap all lands you control. So this is very good in conjunction with something like Nyxbloom Ancient, where you tap all your lands for, let's say you have a grand total of 15 mana. Tap for 15 mana, pay 9, and untap all your lands, so you still have 6 left over. Tap another 15, you end up with a grand total of 21 mana, which is busted. This card is, like, just a brutal finisher, and you can, like, afterwards you can start dealing damage using spot removal. You can, again, more spot removal, and one of the few ways in this deck to gain life. She is really mean. Typically she'll have haste too if you just have a haste enabler on the board. So 9/9, haste, vigilance, reach, trample for 9 that untaps all your lands is really good. Void Winnower, 11/9. Opponents can't cast spells with even converted mana costs, and can't block with creatures with even converted mana costs. This card, typically when it's played, your opponents, they just can't even. Enough said. Apex Devastator, 10/10 for 10. Cascade, 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 Cascade. Cascade says whenever you cast it, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less, and then you can cast that card for free. And separated instances of Cascade all like to happen separately. So when you there are only let's see, 2 other cards in the deck that cost more than this to cast, so you will just always get this plus 4 free spells. That'll typically be big beaters like, you know, like this stuff. And actually with Zakama, it counts as casting, so it will still untap your lands with Zakama if you hit Zakama with this. Very good. This card is really mean. It That Betrays. This is the only creature card that costs more than that, and this is also a brand new addition to the deck. 11/11 for 12 with Annihilator 2. This is one of the cards that's really good to hit with that, oh shoot, what's the name of the card? With Deceiver Reform, to turn all your creatures into copies of it. It says, whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent, put that card onto the battlefield under your control. So whenever your opponent's sacrificing any permanents for any reason, you get those permanents. This gets fetches. This gets fetches. It gets things like not treasures, but it gets like Lotus Petal, or it gets any other things that you're like cashing in for something good. Any kind of like deck that's based on sacrificing things, you get all their shit back. This goes really good with Anguished on, or not Anguished Unmaking. There's a board wipe. It's a white board wipe that makes you choose for each player you choose a like enchantment, planeswalker, land, whatever, and then they sacrifice the rest. Goes really good with that. It also goes really good with a card called Devastating Dreams. The only reason I'm not running that board wipe and Devastating Dreams is because this deck runs a very strict, usually 2 instants or sorceries. Right now it's running 3, but it normally would run 2. This card is really, really, really good. It's just nuts. Time for the final 3 cards. These are the sorceries in the deck. This first one, yes, I know, it's in Japanese. I just thought it looked cool. This is Natural Order. Natural Order says for 4 mana, sorcery, as an additional cost to cast it, sacrifice a green creature you control, which, let's say it's Mayael. Sacrifice Mayael. Then, search your library for any green creature card and put it onto the battlefield. That can be Autarka, or it could be Old Gnawbone, Nyx Bloom Ancient, Terastodon, Archetype Endurance, just all these nasty green creatures. You just go fetch any of them. Just put it onto the battlefield for 4 mana. Yeah. Okay, so these are the last 2 sorceries. Sorry, my recording keeps cutting out, so I'm going to make these last 2 quick. Primal Surge, essentially, exile the top card. You can put it out for free if it's a permanent. Otherwise, and if you do that, you can repeat this process. So, essentially, put top permanent out, pop top permanent, top permanent, top permanent, permanent, until you hit a non-permanent card. Then you exile that card and stop. This card typically puts out most of your deck. If you cast this and have this card in hand, you can also cast Warp World to shuffle your library into your library and then play your library. It's kind of the little fun combo with this. This card is also just good most of the time. You'll have lots of lands. A lot of people already know how this card works. It's a very hated card. If you don't already know how it works, essentially everybody shuffles all the permanents they own into their library and then reveals that many cards on the top of their library. Puts all artifact, creature, and land cards into play, and then puts all enchantments into play. Doesn't get planeswalkers. It's really good against Super Friends. It's really good against Spellslinger decks like Narset. That's one of this deck card's main purposes, is to deal with Narset. Because we have, in our play group, we have someone who plays Narset. It is awful and unbearable. But yeah, that's what this card's in here for. And that's that. That's my summary of Mayael the Anima. I'm going to be making a more in-depth video later that will explain each card more specifically and a bit more, really go over what each card does, for anybody who doesn't really understand. For anybody who is really new to Magic, to get a really good understanding of how each card works and what they do with each other. Anyway, yeah, that's my video. Thank you for watching. See you again.